G'day guys, welcome back to Bloodline Armoury. So firstly, if I sound a little bit different, I apologise. I had some surgery last week on my jaw and it's still a bit agonising. So just bear with me. Okay, so today, something a little bit different. Those of you who know me well enough know that I fairly often just do something completely random and end up making something for somebody for a multitude of reasons. But what I'm going to do today is I'm actually making a Kiridashi for Adam Savage. So, I mean, unless you've been living under a rock, you probably know who Adam Savage is. If you don't, he's the guy from Tested, and if you don't know who Tested is, then he's the guy from Mythbusters. So there is a good reason behind it. One, I have learnt so much from watching him, especially with his Tested show. Over the years, just from little tiny things that I would never have thought of, organisation, just a multitude of things that this guy does, and he really is amazing for a lot of reasons. And he does a lot of stuff with hobbyist materials, you know, from like balsa wood, plastics, things like that. So often uses scalpels and whatnot. So I figured a Kiridashi, for those of you that don't know what it is, essentially is, I guess you could call it a craft knife. It's a utility knife that dates way back to medieval Japan. Very handy to have. It's a 0-degree bevel blade, which I'll get into later. Yeah, very good blade to have. So I'm sure he'll find it useful. I'm actually going to make two, one that he can just have as a keepsake or a display or whatever you like, and one which will be the actual useful and used one, I hope. So I'm going to do a Damascus. I say that like I haven't done it yet, but I'm filming this in reverse order. So this is a canister that I forged a few days ago. It contains 1095, 1084, 99% pure nickel, 15N20. So I'm going to draw this guy out into some smaller billets, and then we will map out the Kiridashi and get cutting. Today we will be using my favourite abrasives, preferred of course. So everything that you see me grinding, cutting, anything that I do today with steel, everything that I'm using is a preferred abrasive. Okay, that includes the cut-off discs and stuff for the grinder and all that stuff as well. Now, when the blades are done, I will be etching Savage onto the blade. Everything Adam seems to have has his name on it. And this is the primary reason on why I decided to do this. I have watched a multitude of videos that he's put up, and quite often he likes to etch things. And always makes like a little swimming pool around the area to be etched, masks up, and uses ferric chloride. Now I'm also guilty of that. When I first started making knives, I used ferric chloride to etch patterns and all sorts of stuff many years ago. But between then and now, I started tinkering with some other chemicals and then over to electric etching. Knife makers use electric etching usually for a touch mark, which is their logo on their blade. I kind of tweaked that little system of putting your logo on to be able to etch things like, I don't know how well you'll see it on camera, but that filigree pattern all the way down I did electrically. Okay, there was no ferric chloride in it at all. So in a way, I guess it's just so I can show Adam a far easier, safer, and a cleaner way of etching. And I mean, he is taught me so much over the years, so it kind of feels good to try and give something back. So hopefully he appreciates what I'm trying to show him, and with a bit of luck he doesn't already know how to do this, which I'll be very surprised if he doesn't. Seems to know everything else. So yeah, we'll start drawing this guy out, and then I'll get back to you, and I'll tell you what comes next. So let's get cracking. Alright guys, so starting to draw this billet out. It's obviously way too big for what I needed, so I drew it out, cut it in half. This is 50% of what I began with. So what I'm going to do is just clean this up and get it down to a nice clean steel and get it squared up as much as I can, and then I'm just going to draw it out just a touch more, and then I will put it on my surface grinder and clean that up and get us a nice little billet to begin marking out and getting ready to cut out these Kiridashi. So I know it looks like a bit of a mess, but if you look here at the end, you can't really see anything, but I assure you that's a Damascus pattern in there somewhere. Anyway, so let's keep going. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to put in every minute of drawing out these billets and the grinding part. I'll get down to the fun stuff. So leave this with me, and then I'll get back to you when I'm ready to start marking out and profiling. Alright guys, so I'm actually in the process of building a standalone surface grinder, a real big guy. This is a surface grinder attachment that I slapped together a couple of years back. It is not the outstanding engineering feat by any stretch of the imagination. It does work though. It does its job just fine for what I need to do. Removing scale and just leveling things out generally, not overly accurate, but just in a general sense. So knock this thing up super easy. Beats the hell out of paying $1,600 for an attachment for this particular grinder. But this arm here with adjustment screw, and then this one here is 2 pieces of I believe it's 1 inch square, and down it's just hinged on a bolt there. I have a sleeve that runs over the top, and a slot, I hope you can see that, a slot milled in the back, and just a neodymium magnet Nothing flash, nothing overly expensive. This magnet is just one of these guys here for holding tools. It is pretty damn strong, and obviously 2 handles, so it does its job. And just a slight turn each time you want to take off more material. So I'll show you. Right, so just give it a twist. So it's obviously not running very quickly, partially just because I don't want the noise on the video. But you can see how it works, and it works, and it's quite suitable for a whole lot of jobs that you would need a surface grinder for. It's just not overly accurate, which the big one that I'm in the process of building, which I will have a video of from start to finish, but that won't be for a couple of months. But this will definitely get you out of trouble. So what I'm doing now is the billet, I've beat it down. I've already chewed off a lot of material, as you can tell, because it's quite thin. I'm just cleaning this up now, and then once that's done, we'll mark it out with some Dicom, and we'll take it to the next step. Let's see, the finish on it's not too bad at all, not too bad. Just as a quick note while I think of it, this belt that I'm using here is a preferred VSM. The part number, I think for memory, is a XK870, I'm pretty sure, ceramic belt. Awesome belt. Like, I mean, I could stand here all day and go on about all the abrasives that Preferred supply and how awesome they are, but you're going to get sick of hearing it real fast. But to be brutally honest, much like their fiber discs and stuff like that, these guys last a hell of a long time. I did used to use Norton Blaze, and I was always really happy with those. But these literally leave the blaze in the dust, you know, like this, hands down, a far superior belt. I will touch more on the Preferred abrasives as I use them throughout the videos, but I strongly recommend trying to source one of these guys if you're not happy with the belts that you're currently using, or you want to, you know, kick it up a notch to something that's going to last just a little bit longer and just do a better job, I think. Anyway, let's keep going. Firstly, I apologize. I'm juggling so many things at once at the moment. Not only am I doing this video, I'm also working on a job for a client at the same time. So not thinking clearly, I forgot to press record when I glued down my stencil from the Kiridashi that I drew up, and the red is just Dicom. Dicom's usually blue, the marking fluid. I have a red one. I don't know why I have a red one. I just like red. It doesn't make much of a difference. It all does the same job. So really all I've done is the bit of steel you saw me chewing away on the surface grinder. I got them down to about 4 millimeters here. I should have cleaned up the edge, but I can do that. It doesn't really matter. Most of this is going to get chopped out, so but you can still see a bit of forge scarring and stuff on the edges. So I just used some PVA glue. It's just photocopy paper. Glued it down to the surface. Sprayed it with Dicom. It does come in a big bottle, and people brush it on. I just use The missus is really nice, and she always keeps these empty bottles of stuff, and it sprays in a super fine mist, and it covers things very, very well. I know a lot of guys will tend to just hold the paper down with magnets or nuts, bolts, whatever, and then spray the Dicam or brush it on and then remove the stencil. I do prefer to glue it down, just because when you're working, I've found that sometimes Dicam tends to disappear, especially when the steel gets very hot. So just as an extra precaution, so you don't lose the outline of what you're doing, I just find it a little easier. So with this one, I did just hold it down, spray it, and remove it. And so this is going to be the daily use Kiridashi. I made it to the same size as the pen pockets on my apron, so hopefully that will fit in Adam's apron. This one here I'm going to do very nice, and it will be completely usable, definitely a usable knife, but more so it's nice to look at, so it'll be more of a display thing or a keepsake or whatever he wants to do with it. So right now I'm just going to cut out the excess around the outside and profile it on the grinder, and then after that we'll talk some more, and I'll explain what we're going to do with this bevel. All right, just a quick note before I start cutting. The preferred cut-off disc that I'm using here, awesome, no other word for it. I've used all sorts of stuff over the years. I really love these. One, they're super thin, super thin, so one, you're not wasting a lot of your material, but I don't know, they just cut really cleanly. And these particular discs here for steel and stainless, with the preferred discs, if you look at the bottom, it says here steel and inox, which is steel and stainless. They're color coded, so black for steel and blue for stainless, and they have a whole range of other cut-off wheels, and they will all be color coded, so you just at a glance can tell which disc is the right one for the material that you're cutting. These do last a hell of a long time as well. They do not wear out quickly. I am going to be doing a standalone video on these. Sorry about that, guys. Yes, I will be doing a standalone video, putting these through their paces and pitting them against other products like 3M's version of these type discs. I already know what the outcome's going to be, hands down, but I'm going to do it anyway, just to show you guys that the things that I say aren't just because I have a relationship with the company. I actually have a relationship with the company because I believe in their products, and they are amazing. So anyway, let's get back to work. Nothing pretty, but there you go. You may have noticed when I started grinding, cutting, sorry, I started at the bottom and sort of slowly inched my way up and then all the way back down again. I do that so it very carefully carves a trench, and it just helps eliminate the possibility of it skipping and then running across the top of your work. This being Damascus and being so thin, and I mean, honestly, it is so close to its finished profile and thickness that if that was to happen, then it would have just ruined the whole job and I'd have to start all over again. So I find working in the opposite direction to the rotation of the disc, so the disc is moving this way, so therefore I'm going to be moving up. It's a little more stable, and if you just inch back and forward, take it nice and slow, you'll put a nice groove in there, and that disc should stay right in that groove and give you a really nice clean cut. Okay, so I gave it a bit of a clean up, and I've just scribed in a rough line where I kind of want my bevel to finish. Now, when beveling stuff, like every knife maker has their own way of doing things, their own reasoning behind it, and different tools. And some guys will swear by using a jig, and some people will swear by freehand grinding. And one thing that I recently learned was I always freehand grind, okay, but I always freehand grind against the platen, the hard flat bit behind the belt. And I recently learned that you can kind of keep the heat down and keep the heat out of your work just a little bit more by staying away from the platen if you don't have to. And I've never really given it any thought. I've always just gone through the motions. You know you got to put a bevel on something, or you got to grind something, so you go to the grinder, and that's it. It's just the way it is. So using a contact wheel to rough in your bevel before just doing that final cleanup of your bevel, one, it saves the life of your belt just a little bit, keeps the heat out of the belt, but it also keeps the heat out of your work, and as a bonus, it doesn't wear out your platen as fast. Now, this has a 0 degree bevel. For those that don't understand what that is, that means on a normal knife you have a bevel, and it usually has a second bevel on the other side. But when it comes down to the cutting edge of the blade, there is this tiny secondary bevel, okay, and that's the bit that you sharpen. With a 0 degree bevel, very much like Japanese swords, katanas, wakizashi, things like that, this bevel will go all the way to a 0 degree. So it will go all the way to the very end. There will be no drop off and a secondary bevel at the end. So you will sharpen this side, and then you will just flatten, sharpen the other side just by holding it flat against your stone to take the wire off the edge. By wire, I'll get into that when I'm sharpening stuff. So yeah, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to rough in the bevel. Is not too much, just enough to put it where I want it, the way I want it, leaving enough meat on the end, because then I have to heat treat it. Okay, I do not want to risk this thing cracking. I'm going to quench it in oil. I quench in canola oil. It's a little more gentle against the steel. When you quench in water, you get a lot of angry vibration and water bubbling and stuff like that, and it's called cavitation. Submarines try and avoid it like the plague, because it gives away their position in the water, and cavitation essentially is just the bursting of bubbles. And when that happens, it causes shock against the steel and can cause it to crack. So we want to avoid that. Also, one thing that you really have to think about when doing something like this, especially if it's specifically for somebody, work out if they're right or left-handed. Every knife that I make for a chef, I always ask them if they're right or left-handed. even if it isn't a 0-degree beveled knife, okay? Even if it's just a traditional Western type knife, I still ask them if they're right or left-handed, because when I shape their handle and the bolsters and the weight distribution and everything else, I plan for it to be in a right hand rather than a left, or vice versa if the chef's a left-hander. That's part of buying a custom knife. You know, if I'm gonna make a knife that you can put in the right, left, whatever, it doesn't really matter, and there's no real difference, then essentially what you're doing is you're buying a mass-produced knife that hasn't been mass-produced. It's the same thing. So you want to do what the client wants, but always nice just to go that little extra bit, you know, and that you know, the person that's going to own that knife is going to love that, and they're going to treasure that knife, and hopefully they'll hand that knife down to somebody else. I don't know about you guys, but I make my knives not just to last a lifetime. I make my knives to last their lifetime and then the lifetime of their kids. So, you know, might be a little ambitious to think that it's going to last that long, but I know the steel will. Maybe not the handle so much, but the steel most certainly will. All right, anyway, enough of that. Let's get into it. Let's rough in this bevel. Also, just as another note, normally it would be a flat grind. It's actually a convex grind. Most notable grinds are either a flat or a concave, so a hollow grind, which you would use the contact wheels to rough in your bevel, and it would give like a scallop. This we don't. So what I'm going to do is I start on the very edge, and then I'll work my way back to that grind line where I want that to finish, because I want it to be flat, but I also want it, just as it meets the rest of the knife, I want it to have just a little bit of a convex roll. That will toughen up the knife a little bit, and it's also traditional, and I'm a traditional kind of guy, so let's do this. So I've worked my way from the edge up, and if I shine the light, you can kind of see there are small scalloping. So even though they are all the way across, there's still scallops, so sort of chamfered. Now that's fine because that's going to be gone, but it needs to be like that. It gives me a good judge of where the bevel is at on its thickness. So up here it's 100%, and down here it's going to be 0. So I have to work out where I want it to be as I work my way down. I do not want to take too much meat off here until after the heat treat. Also, with the heat treating, make sure you preheat your heat treating oven. As soon as it comes out of the quench, it has to go straight in the oven. You don't want it laying around. You don't want to leave it to the next day. You must chuck it in straight away. For this, it'll go in the oven for an hour at around 225 degrees Celsius. And at that hour it'll turn off, and then I just let the oven cool down. For the amount of material that I've got here, I'm only going to do 1 heat cycle. It doesn't need 2, and it should take the stresses out of it nicely.